France has been rocked by the Yellow Vest movement going back for the past 3 months or so. This movement, in fact, I think it was more than 3 months. I think it was more like 6. But how many ever months it's been, this initially started with a gas protest, meaning they increased the amount. Macron was trying to lower taxes for the rich and increase taxes on the poor within the community. That community, which a rich tradition of protest, did not sit well to that. And they got up and they protested, wearing the yellow vests that they are required to wear when they're driving. The initial goal of that was the fuel costs. It eventually morphed into taking Macron's head and deposing the Macron's government. The police, the French police, despite most of these protests being peaceful, they have been vicious and violent in repressing these protests. Batons, exploding munitions, and banned chemical weapons. An Algerian team won in a soccer match. They went out to essentially celebrate. And can you guess the way the French police responded to what was a mostly peaceful celebration? Guess. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you enjoy this content and you find yourself coming back to this channel often, please consider supporting this content through PayPal or Patreon. Not to mention, if you like this video, please like this video and share this video if you do indeed like it. This video is not going to be long. It's more so just throwing attention to this particular thing. An Algerian team wins. That Algerian team has, if you know, there's a history between Algeria and France. France was a colonial empire. Algeria was one of those places that they colonized. Algeria wins. The Algeria team celebrates, or people from Algeria, Africans, go out to celebrate. The police engaged them as if they were engaging some kind of military armada, using chemical weapons, dumping hundreds of canisters on thousands of people in a confined area. These chemical weapons are banned, however, not specifically in France per se, meaning militarily, you can't use these weapons. However, within the context of the population, have at it. You can gas as many people as you want. Just don't do it to military soldiers that are expecting to take some level of fire and life-threatening situations. Do you know that there were children here? There were moms. They were trying to protect their kids from the gas. There were toddlers. There were babies. Under these chemical weapons, again, that militarily are banned from use. Take a look at this. This is France. This was a few days ago. That's France. If you thought that was Ukraine, you could be, forgiven. And by the way, that's not even the worst of it. That violence at times have been far, far worse than what you are seeing here. I want you to show another point. The sheer horror of the situation was made abundantly clear on Champs-Élysées last week, when, as usual, the catalyst for much social disorder was French forces was the law and order using chemical weapons on their own citizens. Video shot of the most famous avenue in the country show a young show young children struggling to get away from clouds of fumes created by tear gas that is banned in war zones. Astonishing as it may sound, French police are allowed to use substances designed to burn eyes, mouth, and lungs against ordinary civilians, but because of international treaties, soldiers up against enemies, genuine enemies, are not. Meaning, if these kids got into the military and ended up in a war zone somewhere, based on international treaties, they would not have to face these type of substances, assuming that people stick with the treaties when they are at war. However, in the context of the government itself, have added. Hundreds of canisters rained down on thousands of men, women, and children who were celebrating the Algeria national football team progressing towards the final of the African Cup Nations. And indeed, after winning it on Friday night, among them were families with toddlers in pushchairs. Others included the kind of young men of North African appearance who the French police, especially those in Paris, tend to despise. Despite all of this, and I like this part, the English language media that reported on the gassing of children, it was only English language media that reported on the gassing of children. French media was instead full of erroneous claims. No, an Algerian football fan was categorically not responsible for a tragic road traffic accident in the southern city of Montpellier, in which a young mother died. Incidents were also hyped up by the usual hypocritical far-left arm. Essentially, the only people that really reported this was English media. The French media pretended as if this didn't exist. Here's the catch. All countries have propaganda outside of the country, but also inside the country. And the same way your political leaders cast themselves as certain things. Joe Biden, I'm just a regular Joe. Well, Joe Biden is a corporatist that when he gets in office is going to cut taxes and work in coordination with Wall Street every bit as much as Hillary Clinton would, every bit as much as Obama did, every bit as much as Clinton did. They're the same person. But they cast themselves in various different ways. I hope you understand what I mean. The Soviet Union would cast itself at the time as we're a socialist country. We care about the social needs and everything else. It was an authoritarian country. Stalin was fucking horrible. I hope you get my point. Regardless of that, they still cast themselves in a particular way as we're a socialist country that tends to the needs and everything else. We're a communist country. It's casting. America agreed with them because America wanted to cast itself as a capitalist country. Freedom, justice, democracy. That's what we care about. Or do we? Or is that the political casting? It's political casting. In this case, France. And the propaganda that France is putting out, it was not going to put out to his own citizens that shit was burning down. And it's not going to put that out because the last thing that France wants is a riot, and their job in this point, from their standpoint, is order. Any country, for the most part, will behave in those terms. It's not that I'm saying it's good. Don't misunderstand me. I'm saying it is. There's a difference in those things. Countries tend to want order, especially if you're in government. Macron's government has been racked with these protests going on for the past God knows how long. He's been trying to get some degree of order, but they want his head. And they have all sorts of grievances that are absolutely real that power them to be out there doing this. Now, in this particular case, we're talking about a football game. But the French police are geared up for Yellow Vest protests because they've been out there for the past God knows how long. They have been gassing and beating and injuring. And in this case, you had children and toddlers that were being gassed by chemical weapons in the French police. I'm saying from Macron's standpoint and from the French government standpoint, they're looking at this as an issue of disorder. And they're looking at it as an issue of disorder. Any government, all governments, need to have a certain degree of control, or at the very least they want it. So what do? They put somewhat of a blacklisting where they play down what is taking place in regards to protests and riots. You don't want other people seeing these protests and riots and start joining into these protests and riots, giving it that much more fuel. They're trying to tamp it out by pretending as if it doesn't exist. I hope that makes sense. Governments have certain priorities. Those priorities, number one, is order. It's order, for better or for worse. It could be, any country, all countries, regardless of what government they have. The point is order. They have this kind of aggregation of energy in which these things kind of remain concise within themselves. The last thing they want is it spinning out of control where the government itself falls apart. So if you're the government, what do? We need to pretend as if this doesn't exist. We need to not allow people to see that this is taking place all across France. That's not the easiest thing to do, because if people have an internet, regardless of French media saying something about it, they'll be able to see something in other sources. However, if people are watching the media, they're not going to be able to see it. The French policemen, they have been kicking ass and taking names. And this reporter is kind of making the point that they're gassing babies and children. This needs to stop. This needs to stop. It will not stop because Macron wants to stay in power. I'm just saying. Thanks all.